The keys made a small sound when they left my hand. A soft clink, metal against metal, like a coin dropping into a jar. That's what I remember most, because everything else in that moment was too loud. My son's voice was loud. My heartbeat was loud. Even the refrigerator humming behind us sounded like it was trying to interrupt. Kyle stood in my kitchen with my car keys dangling from 2 fingers, and he looked at me the way people look at a child who has reached for a hot stove. "You're too old to understand," he said. "Not, Mom, I'm worried." Not, "Let's talk." Not, "Can we figure this out together?" Just that. A sentence that didn't even pretend to be kind. I opened my mouth to answer, but nothing came out right away. But because I was still processing the fact that we were even here, arguing about my right to leave my own house, when the only reason Kyle had moved back in with me was because he'd needed a few weeks to get back on his feet. That was 8 months ago. The kitchen light above us flickered once, the way it always does when the wind kicks up. My late husband used to say it was the house blinking, like it was alive. Kyle glanced at that light, and then back at me. "I'm keeping these," he said, and he slipped the keys into his pocket. I felt something in my chest tighten. Not fear, exactly. Something closer to disbelief, because I'm 72. I raised 2 children. I buried my husband. I balanced a checkbook back when it was still a paper booklet and the math had to be right or your groceries bounced. But now my own son was standing in my kitchen, telling me I couldn't be trusted with my own car. "I'm not a child," I said. Kyle exhaled, impatient. "Mom, please don't make this harder than it has to be." Harder. That was another word he'd started using a lot. As if I was the obstacle. As if the last few months weren't a steady pattern of him taking little things from me and calling it help. First it was my mail, then it was my online banking login. Then it was the phrase, "Just let me handle it," said with a smile that never reached his eyes. And now it was my keys. I stepped closer. "Give them back." Kyle didn't move. His eyes drifted past me, to the window over the sink, where the backyard was dark and still. "There's a problem with the house," he said suddenly. I blinked. "What?" He lifted his phone. "I got a call. The guy from the utility company. He said there's an issue, a gas leak maybe. They have to check the line. We can't stay here tonight." A gas leak. My stomach dipped. "I don't smell anything," I said. "It's not always obvious," he replied too quickly. "That's the point. You don't understand how these things work. Come on, just grab a coat. I already booked a motel room, 1 night. We'll come back in the morning." Something about the way he said already made my skin prickle. Like the plan was set. Like my agreement was just a formality. I stood there in my own kitchen, trying to decide what was real. The fear of a gas leak, or the fear of my son moving pieces around me while I watched. Kyle softened his voice. "Mom, do you want to take a chance? Do you want to be stubborn and end up on the news because the house blew up?" He knew exactly how to frame it. Safety, responsibility, aging. He took my hesitation and turned it into proof that I needed him. I don't know if I would have gone if I hadn't thought of my neighbor, Mrs. Dyer, who'd lost her entire garage to a fire a few years back because of a faulty heater. I didn't want to be foolish. So I nodded. Kyle's shoulders loosened, relief sliding over his face like he'd just won a small battle he expected to win. "Good," he said. "Good. I'll drive." He said it gently, as if it was for my benefit. And when I reached for my purse on the counter, I noticed something else. A folder. Not the gas company. Not a utility notice. A thick manila folder tucked under his arm like he'd brought it in with him. "What's that?" I asked. Kyle's grip tightened on it for half a second. "Just paperwork," he said. Then he smiled. A small, practiced smile. The kind you're too old to understand. The motel smelled like bleach and cheap detergent. The bedspread was that familiar patterned fabric that tries to hide stains by looking busy. Kyle carried my overnight bag like he was being a good son. He made a show of turning on the bathroom light, checking the shower, adjusting the thermostat. "You're safe here," he said. Safe. That word again. He handed me a plastic keycard like it was a pacifier. Then he sat on the edge of the bed and finally looked tired. "I'll go back over there early," he said. "I'll meet the guys. Make sure everything's handled. You can sleep." "The guys," I repeated. "The utility guys," he corrected instantly. I watched him. Really watched him. Kyle used to be easy to read. When he was 5, you could see guilt on him from across the room if he'd snuck cookies. When he was 15, you could see worry when he'd done something stupid and was waiting for the fallout. Now he had a face he could rearrange, a face that held secrets like they were normal. "Let me see the number they called from," I said. Kyle blinked. "What?" "The utility company," I repeated, keeping my voice even. "Show me the call." His phone was in his hand already. He didn't move. Then, with a laugh that sounded too light, he said, "Mom, why are you doing this? Why are you being difficult?" "I'm not being difficult," I said. "I'm being careful." Kyle's jaw tightened. "You're being paranoid." "Paranoid? That's what people call you when you ask for proof." He stood up abruptly. "So I'm going to the vending machine," he said. "You want anything?" "No," I said. Kyle hesitated, one extra beat. Then he slid the phone into his pocket. And for the first time that night, I felt certain of one thing. There was no gas leak. There was just Kyle. And whatever he'd decided to do while I slept. After he left, I sat on the edge of the motel bed and stared at the room's one framed picture. A generic landscape with a river and trees, the kind of art designed to be forgotten. My hands were shaking slightly. I told myself I was overreacting. Kyle had been stressed. He'd lost his job. His marriage had collapsed. He'd moved back into my house with a suitcase and that tight, careful smile. He'd promised me it was temporary, and he'd been helpful. He paid for groceries sometimes. He fixed a loose step. He called the plumber when the faucet started leaking. But he also started speaking for me, at the doctor's office, at the pharmacy, on the phone with my insurance company. He started answering questions I hadn't even been asked. He started introducing himself as if the house was partly his. And when I pointed it out, he'd always said the same thing. "Mom, I'm just trying to protect you." Protect, another pretty word. I lay down without turning off the lamp. I listened to the faint noises of the motel, water running in the room next door, a distant TV, footsteps in the hall. At some point, I drifted, and I dreamed of my house. Not the way it looked now, the way it looked when I first moved in. Fresh paint, new carpet, my husband carrying boxes, laughing because the couch wouldn't fit through the doorway. And I dreamed of my kids running down the hallway, of the smell of dinner, of the creak on the third stair. And then I dreamed of silence, of waking up and feeling something missing, like a tooth pulled overnight. Kyle banged on my door at 7:12 a.m. "Mom," he called, cheerful. "Time to go." I opened the door in my sweater, hair unbrushed, heart already racing. Kyle held 2 coffees and a paper bag. "Breakfast?" he announced, bright. "See? Everything's fine." I didn't take the coffee. "Did you meet them?" I asked. Kyle nodded quickly. "Yep, they checked it. It was—" He paused, searching for a lie he liked. "It was the line. They had to shut it off. You can't stay there until they finish." "How long?" I asked. Kyle's smile twitched. "Shouldn't be long." I stared at him. "What?" he snapped, the brightness evaporating. "Yeah, what's with that look?" "I want to go home," I said. "We are," he replied. "We're going to go get your medicine and then—" "No," I said. Home. Now. Kyle's eyes narrowed like I'd insulted him. Then he sighed, exaggerated, like a man carrying a burden. Fine, he said. But don't freak out if it's messy. They're working. We drove in Kyle's car because my keys were still in his pocket. The morning was cold and bright. Frost edged the grass in the motel parking lot. As we pulled onto the road, Kyle kept the radio on low, some talk show host filling the car with noise. Kyle talked over it. After this, he said casually, we should talk about making things official. You know, paperwork. So if anything happens, I can make decisions. It's just smart. My fingers tightened around my purse. Power of attorney, he added, as if saying the words would make them harmless. I turned to him. No. Kyle's hands tightened on the steering wheel. You always say no because you don't understand, he snapped. Then he caught himself and softened his voice again. Mom, listen, it's not about taking anything. It's about keeping you safe. Safe? There it was again. The car turned onto my street. The trees were bare, their branches thin against the sky. And then I saw it. Or rather, I didn't. Because where my house should have been, where my blue shutters and the little porch light should have greeted me, there was open air. For a split second, my brain refused to accept it. It tried to correct the picture. It tried to say we'd turned too soon or too late. But the mailbox was still there, bent slightly, like it always had been since my husband backed into it in 1998. And the mailbox was still there. And behind it, nothing. Just raw dirt and broken boards and a yellow excavator parked at an angle like a sleeping animal. A smell hit me through the closed car windows. Dust and splintered wood. Kyle slowed the car like this was normal, like he was showing me a renovation. I stared through the windshield as my chest tightened until it hurt. The house was gone, not sold, not locked. Gone. A vacant lot where my life had been. What is this? I whispered. Kyle didn't answer right away. He pulled to the curb near my mailbox and put the car in park. Mom, he said carefully, don't panic. I turned toward him slowly. My voice came out thin. Where's my house? Kyle swallowed. They had to take it down. They, I repeated. Who is they? Kyle lifted his hands in a gesture meant to calm me, but meant to control the temperature of the room. Look, he said, you weren't safe there. The foundation was bad. The gas line was bad. It was an accident waiting to happen. We had no choice. No choice. He said it like demolition was a medical procedure. My body went cold. Get out, I said. Kyle blinked. Mom, get out of the car, I said louder. Kyle's jaw tightened, but he did. I got out too. The air outside was sharp and full of dust. It clung to the back of my throat. I took one step toward the lot, then another. The ground was churned up, uneven, scattered with pieces of my life. A chunk of drywall, a broken 2x4, a twisted piece of metal that looked like it had been part of my porch railing. I saw a fragment of something familiar and my stomach lurched. My kitchen tile, white with little blue squares, or cracked into pieces. I stood there, dizzy, trying to breathe. This wasn't a bad dream. This was physical. This was real. Kyle came up beside me and put a hand on my shoulder. I shrugged it off so hard he stumbled. Did you do this? I demanded. Kyle's face hardened. Mom, stop. People are watching. People. I turned. Mrs. Dyer stood at her window across the street, hand covering her mouth. Two men in reflective vests were near the excavator, staring at us like we were an inconvenience. And on the edge of the lot, a white sign had been staked into the dirt. I walked toward it on legs that didn't feel like mine. The sign read, Property of Canyon Ridge Development. No trespassing. Under that, smaller letters. Demolition permit approved. I turned back to Kyle. Kyle's face was blank now. A mask. How? I whispered. Does a permit get approved overnight? Kyle didn't answer. His silence was an answer. I stepped closer to him. My voice shook. Kyle, what did you do? He lifted his chin slightly. You don't understand how this works, he said. There it was again. Not concern, not love. A verdict. I understand enough, I said, and I felt something inside me harden into something I hadn't felt in months. A clean anger, the kind that makes you think clearly. Give me my keys, I said. Kyle shook his head. No. Give me my keys, I repeated. Kyle's nostrils flared. Mom, you're upset. You're not thinking straight. That's why I'm handling this. Handling. Like I was a package. I stared at him. Really stared. And for the first time, I saw it. Not stress, not desperation. Calculation. He wasn't surprised the house was gone, but he was surprised I was standing here asking questions. A man in a hard hat approached us, clipboard in hand. Ma'am, he said, you can't be on the property. This is my property, I said. He looked at Kyle. Kyle stepped forward like he belonged there. It's fine, Kyle said. She's with me. With me? I felt my stomach twist. The man in the hard hat nodded, satisfied, and walked away. I turned back to my son. My voice dropped. What did you show them? Kyle's eyes flickered. He didn't answer. And in that moment, the shape of it came into view. Not a gas leak, not safety, not help, a takeover. My son hadn't taken my keys because he feared I'd crash. He'd taken my keys because he feared I'd escape. I went to Mrs. Dyer's house first. Not because I wanted comfort, because I wanted a witness. When she opened her door, her eyes were red and wide. Oh, Marjorie, she whispered. Oh, my God. I stepped inside and felt her living room wrap around me, warm, familiar, safe in a way my own home had stopped feeling. What did you see? I asked. Mrs. Dyer's hands trembled as she pointed toward her front window. They came last night, after you left. I didn't leave, I said, voice tight. Kyle made me leave. Mrs. Dyer nodded quickly. There were trucks, big ones, a crew. They put up lights like it was daytime. I thought it was an emergency. I thought something had happened in your basement. I swallowed. She continued. And your son, Kyle, he was out there the whole time, talking to the men, signing things. Signing. Did you call anyone? I asked. She looked ashamed. I tried calling you. It went to voicemail. I tried knocking. But the lights were so bright and those men... She shook her head. I was scared. I nodded. I wasn't angry at her. I was angry at myself. Mrs. Dyer hesitated, then reached for a small tablet on her coffee table. I have a camera, she said. For the porch, it records the street. My heart thudded. Show me, I said. She tapped the screen, fingers fumbling. The video loaded. It was grainy and tilted, but it was my street, my mailbox, the glow of floodlights, a moving truck. And then Kyle, my son. Wearing his dark jacket, holding a folder, shaking hands with a man in a reflective vest. The timestamp in the corner read 11:46 p.m. Kyle walked toward my front door, not unlocking it, not using a key, because he'd had my keys. He opened the door like he owned it. My vision blurred. Mrs. Dyer's voice came softly. Marjorie, what is he doing? I watched the video as if my eyes could force it to change. Kyle stepped inside. Then he stepped out again, carrying something, a box, then another. Then the crew moved, and the next clip showed the excavator's arm swinging, the bite of metal into wood, my porch collapsing, my house folding like paper. By 3:18 a.m., the roof was down. By 5:02 a.m., there was only rubble. The sun rose on a hole where my life had been. I stared at the screen until the picture stopped meaning anything. Kyle had done this. He had done this while I slept in a motel room under the story of a gas leak. Mrs. Dyer touched my arm. "You need to call the police." "Yes," I said. Then I heard myself add, "and a lawyer." Because I knew something else too. Kyle hadn't just ordered demolition on a whim. He'd needed paperwork, permits, the signatures. He'd needed a story that would hold up when questions came. And the most frightening part was this: he'd probably already built that story. At the police station, the air smelled like old coffee and printer toner. The officer at the front desk listened with the polite face people use when they think you're confused. "My house was demolished," I said. "Last night, without my permission." He blinked. "Demolished?" "Yes," I said, pushing my driver's license across the counter. "That address, that's my home. I want to report a crime." He glanced at the license, then at me. "How old are you, ma'am?" he asked. The question hit me like a slap. "Old enough to own property," I said. He cleared his throat. "Do you have any documentation?" "My house is documentation," I snapped, then forced myself to breathe. "I have the deed. Oh, at least I did. And my neighbor has security footage." That changed his posture. He stood up straighter. "Okay," he said. "Let's start a report." We sat in a small room while he typed. He asked questions. "When did you last see the property intact? Who had access? Do you have family?" When I said, "my son," his eyebrows lifted slightly. "I want to be clear," I said. "I did not authorize any sale. I did not sign anything. I did not request demolition." He nodded. But I could see the skepticism in the corners of his eyes. Because people don't like stories where the villain is a son. It makes them uncomfortable. It makes them imagine their own families. After the report, I went to the county recorder's office. The building was bright and quiet, paper heavy. A woman behind glass asked for the address. She typed it in. Then she frowned. "Huh," she said. My stomach tightened. "What?" She turned the monitor slightly toward me. "Owner, Canyon Ridge Development LLC transfer recorded 5 days ago. 5 days." I felt the room tilt. "That's impossible," I whispered. The woman pursed her lips. "It's recorded," she said. "There's a deed." "I didn't sign a deed," I said. She hesitated, then tapped a button and printed something. She slid the paper toward me. A copy. A signature. My name in cursive. Except it wasn't my handwriting. It was close enough to fool someone who wanted to be fooled. But I knew my own hand. I stared at the notary stamp at the bottom. A name, a commission number, a date. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. This wasn't just Kyle being reckless. This was Kyle committing fraud. And he'd had help. I called Kyle from the parking lot. He answered on the second ring. "Mom," he said, weary, like I'd interrupted his day. "Where are my keys?" I asked. Kyle sighed. "Marjorie." "Don't," I said. "Don't use my name like I'm a problem. Where are my keys?" "You don't need to drive," he said. "We're handling this." "We?" I repeated. Kyle paused. "Just long enough." Then he said, "Look, you're upset. You're not thinking clearly. Come to my apartment. We'll talk." "No," I said. "You come to the police station. Right now." Kyle laughed once. "Seriously, you're going to embarrass yourself." Embarrass. That was the weapon now. Make me afraid of being seen. Make me afraid of my own story. "I saw the deed," I said quietly. "The one with my forged signature." The silence on the other end was sharp. Then Kyle's voice changed. not softer. Colder. "You don't know what you're looking at," he said. "I know you lied," I replied, "and I know you took me out of my house so you could destroy it." Kyle exhaled, controlled. "Mom, listen, it's done. You can't undo it. And if you keep pushing, people are going to start asking questions about whether you're..." "Okay." There it was. The threat. Not fists, not shouting. A suggestion that my mind was the problem. "You're too old to understand," he added, almost gently now. "Let me handle it." I held the phone away from my ear for a second, looking at it like it was something rotten. Then I said, "You stole my life." Kyle's voice was sharp again. "I'm saving you. You just can't see it." I ended the call. My hands were shaking. But my mind was clear. Kyle wasn't protecting me. He was erasing me. I found an elder law attorney the way people find lifesavers, desperately. Natalie, my daughter, drove down that afternoon when she heard. She walked into the motel room I'd moved back into like a storm. Her eyes flicked over my face, the untouched coffee on the table, the stiff way I was sitting. Then she said, very quietly, "Where's Kyle?" "I don't know," I said. Natalie's jaw clenched. "He did this," she said, not a question. I nodded. Natalie's hands balled into fists. "I'm going to kill him." "No," I said, and my voice surprised even me. "You're not. We're going to do it the right way." Natalie looked at me. Really looked. Then she nodded once, hard. The attorney's office smelled like leather and paper. Diplomas lined the wall. A bowl of mints sat on the table like an invitation to calm down. The attorney, Ms. Patel, didn't offer me mints. She offered me clarity. "You're describing classic elder financial exploitation," she said, after she reviewed the deed copy and watched Mrs. Dyer's video. Classic. The word made me nauseous, as if this happened all the time. "We can file an emergency petition," Ms. Patel continued. "We can request a temporary restraining order. We can notify Adult Protective Services. We can also contact the developer's title insurance. If the transfer was fraudulent, they have exposure." Exposure. I sat very still. "What about my house?" I asked. Ms. Patel's expression softened. "Your house is gone," she said, "but the value isn't, and your rights aren't." Natalie leaned forward. "Can Kyle go to jail?" Ms. Patel didn't flinch. "If we can prove forgery, fraud, and theft, yes, especially if there's a pattern." Pattern. I thought of the missing mail, the changed passwords, the way Kyle had started answering my phone, the way he'd tried to isolate me. It wasn't one decision. It was a campaign. Ms. Patel tapped the notary stamp on the deed. "This is important," she said. "Notaries keep journals. If this notary notarized your signature, they either saw you sign or they didn't. And if they didn't, they're in trouble." Natalie's eyes narrowed. "Kyle had a friend," she said slowly. "From high school, works at a car dealership. His wife does paperwork, notary stuff." Ms. Patel nodded. "We'll subpoena it." My heart hammered. This was becoming real in a different way, not just grief and shock, a fight. Kyle showed up 2 days later, not at the motel, not at the police station, at Natalie's house, and where I'd moved, because the motel felt like I was waiting for my life to return. It was late afternoon. Natalie's kids were at school. I was at the kitchen table staring at a blank notepad, like I could rewrite my home by listing what I remembered. The doorbell rang. Natalie peeked through the window beside the door and froze. Kyle stood on the porch, hands in pockets, face calm. He looked like a man stopping by for a Sunday dinner. Natalie opened the door without stepping outside. "What do you want?" she asked. Kyle smiled slightly. "To talk to Mom." Natalie's body blocked the doorway. "No." Kyle's gaze slid past her, landing on me. "Mom," he said, "you're doing this wrong." I stood slowly. Kyle spoke with patient disappointment. "You're letting Natalie whip you into a panic. Now you don't understand the process." "There is no process," Natalie snapped. "You bulldozed her house." Kyle shrugged lightly. It was condemned. "By who?" I asked. Kyle's eyes narrowed for the first time. "It's not safe to argue right now," he said, and the tone was new. "Not caring? Warning." Then he pulled something from his pocket. A set of keys. My keys. He held them up like bait. "Come with me," he said. "We'll get you settled somewhere appropriate. A nice place, assisted living, meals, nurses, no stress. You won't have to deal with paperwork." I stared at him. The audacity of it made my mouth go dry. "You destroyed my home," I said, "and now you're offering me a room." Kyle's smile tightened. "Mom, don't be dramatic." "Dramatic, another word people use to shrink you." Natalie stepped forward. "Get off my porch," she said. But Kyle looked at her with bored contempt. "You think you're helping, but you're just prolonging this," he said. Then he turned back to me. "If you keep pushing, Mom, the court is going to ask about capacity. They'll look at your age, your stress, your emotions. They'll decide you need someone to manage things." He said it softly, like advice, but it was a threat. I felt my hands tremble, not from fear of him, from the ugliness of what he was willing to do. Ms. Patel's words echoed, classic exploitation. Kyle was trying to make me doubt my right to fight. I took a slow breath. Then I said, "You called me too old to understand." Kyle blinked. "I heard you," I continued. "But you know what I understand better than you do?" Kyle's eyes narrowed. "I understand signatures," I said. "I understand that I didn't sign that deed. I understand that you lied about a gas leak. I understand that you needed me out of my house so you could demolish it before I could stop you." Kyle's smile vanished. Natalie's hand found mine. I held on to it. "And I understand," I said, voice steady now, "that you're not my caretaker. You're my thief." Kyle's face flushed. For the first time, he looked young again, caught, cornered. Then his eyes flicked to the street. A car turned the corner slowly. A cruiser. Kyle's posture stiffened. Natalie didn't look away. "Officer," she called. Kyle's gaze snapped back to us. He lowered the keys, shoved them into his pocket. "You're going to regret this," he said quietly. Then he walked off the porch before the cruiser even stopped. The officer stepped out as Kyle reached his car. Kyle didn't run. He didn't have to. What he thought he'd built a story no one could break. The next weeks were a blur of paper and waiting rooms. Ms. Patel filed emergency motions. Adult Protective Services interviewed me, gently, like they didn't want to offend me by confirming what my son had done. The police opened an investigation. The developer's representatives called with tight, careful voices, insisting they were good-faith purchasers. I learned a new language: quitclaim, title insurance, notary journal, emergency injunction. I learned how quickly the world assumes your age is a weakness. At one meeting, a man in a suit asked me, without looking embarrassed, if I'd been confused when I signed. I stared at him and said, "I didn't sign." He blinked. Then he asked again, in a different shape, "Are you sure?" I held his gaze. I'm sure." Natalie squeezed my knee under the table. Ms. Patel slid a folder across to the man. Inside was Mrs. Dyer's camera footage, the timestamp, Kyle's face, Kyle's folder, Kyle's hand shaking someone's hand. The man's jaw tightened. His eyes flicked away. Because proof has a weight. It lands on the table and changes the air. Then the notary journal came. Ms. Patel's subpoena forced it out. A copy of the page where my name was written, where a signature, meant to be mine, had been scrawled. And the most important line of all, I'd provided. None. No driver's license, no verification. Just my name. Stamped, sealed, sold. The notary, Kyle's friend's wife, claimed she'd met me. Claimed she'd seen me sign. Claimed she remembered my face. But she couldn't answer one simple question. What color were my eyes? She guessed. Wrong. So Kyle's story started to crack. The hearing was in a small courtroom that smelled like wood polish and cold air. Kyle sat at the defendant's table in a suit that didn't fit his shoulders right. He looked at me once. Just once. And in that look, I saw something sharp. Not guilt, not apology, resentment, like he blamed me for not staying erased. The judge listened. Ms. Patel presented the timeline, the forged deed, the recorded transfer, the demolition permit that had been approved days before Kyle ever claimed there was an emergency, the motel receipt, the neighbor's footage. Kyle's attorney argued about misunderstandings, about intent, about family conflicts, about confusion. Then Ms. Patel stood. Your Honor, she said, calm, this is not confusion. This is planning. This is coercion. This is an adult son isolating his elderly parent, to removing her transportation, relocating her under false pretenses, and then transferring her property without her consent. She looked directly at the judge. And when the victim protested, he threatened her with incapacity proceedings. Kyle shifted. His jaw clenched. The judge's eyes narrowed slightly. Then the judge asked Kyle one question. Mr. Ward, he said, where is your mother's signature verified? Kyle's lawyer opened his mouth. The judge held up a hand. I'm asking your client. Kyle swallowed. He looked at the table. Then he said softly, it's in the documents. The judge stared. Where, he repeated, is the verification? Where is the identification? Where is the journal entry showing lawful notarization? Kyle's throat worked. He didn't answer. The judge leaned back. The courtroom was silent. Then the judge said, or the court grants the emergency injunction. The deed is under challenge. Mr. Ward, you are ordered to have no contact with your mother pending further proceedings. Kyle's head snapped up. His face changed. And for the first time, I saw fear. Real fear. Not about losing a relationship. About losing control. The resolution didn't happen in one dramatic moment. It happened in steps, in letters, in meetings, in the slow grind of systems that move far too slowly when you're the one sleeping in someone else's guest room. The developer's title insurer eventually offered a settlement because even they could see the problem. They didn't want to admit wrongdoing. They wanted the nightmare to stop. The amount was enough for me to buy a small house outright. Not the same house, not the same porch, not the same kitchen tile, but a place that was mine. Mine in a way Kyle couldn't reinterpret. Kyle, meanwhile, faced charges: forgery, financial exploitation, fraud. He tried to bargain. He tried to cry. He tried to tell people he'd been trying to help. But the evidence didn't care about his story. The evidence was quiet, stamped, time-stamped, printed, recorded. And in the end, it spoke louder than his voice ever could. The day I signed for my new house, I held the pen for a long moment before I put it to paper. Not because I was confused, because I was grieving. Not just my old home, but the version of my son I thought existed. Afterward, Natalie drove me over to the lot where my old house had been. It was winter now. The ground had settled. Weeds had started to push through the dirt. The mailbox was gone. Someone had taken it, or crushed it, or tossed it. I stood at the edge of the property line and let the wind hit my face. I tried to picture the hallway, the living room, the spot where my husband's chair used to sit. But memory is strange. It holds on to some things and lets others blur. Natalie stood beside me, hands in her coat pockets. "I'm sorry," she said. I nodded. Then I said, "He didn't just take the house." Natalie looked at me. "He took my certainty," I continued. "He tried to convince me I couldn't trust my own mind." Natalie's eyes filled. I exhaled slowly. And he was wrong. That night, in my new house, I sat at my new kitchen table and placed a set of keys in a small bowl by the door. My keys. Not because I needed a symbol, because I needed the habit. The sound of them landing there was small, but it meant something. It meant I could leave when I wanted. It meant I could return. It meant I was still the person in charge of my own life. Weeks later, I saw Kyle once. Not in a courtroom. Not in a meeting. In a hallway at the county building. He looked thinner. His hair was shorter. He held a folder. This time not tucked under his arm like power, but clutched like a shield. He stopped when he saw me. His mouth opened. I didn't know what he planned to say. "I'm sorry. You made me do it. I was trying to help." He didn't get the chance. Because the most important thing I'd learned wasn't about deeds or notaries. It was about boundaries. I walked past him. He called my name once. "Mom." I didn't stop. I didn't turn. I didn't give him the gift of my attention because attention was what he'd used like a lever. And as I pushed open the exit door, the cold air hit my face, and I felt something settle into place. Not peace, not yet, but stability. The kind that comes when you stop negotiating with someone who only understands taking. Kyle had said I was too old to understand. But the truth was simpler. He was too arrogant to realize what I understood perfectly. A house isn't just wood and drywall. It's a record. It's a history. It's proof that you built something that can't be explained away by someone else's story. My old house was gone, but I wasn't. And the next time someone tried to take my keys out of my hand, they would learn what Kyle learned too late. Age doesn't make you blind. It just teaches you exactly what you refuse to lose.